Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Wheat planting is in full swing and with the rain, there's a lot of optimism. Let's begin with a quick update with our Extension Small Grain Specialist, Jeff Edwards.
Well, USDA numbers have us anywhere from 15 to 20% planted. I think that's pretty accurate. Most of our forage-only producers got started there in early September. Our dual-purpose producers are just getting started. We're really in that optimal window where we have a trade-off between forage production and grain production in those systems. We also have a decent amount of soil moisture across much of the state, so that's helped us out as far as getting the drills rolling.
Also rolling, more of the new or updated Farm Bill programs. SUNUP's Dave Deacon talks with our Ag Policy Specialist, Jody Campeacci.
If you haven't heard about September 30th, you haven't been listening to Jody Campeacci, because that's an important date when it comes to crop insurance deadlines. Jody, let's talk about September 30th.
Okay, well, September 30th is the deadline for crop insurance for fall planted crops, and that includes wheat. So a lot of guys in Oklahoma need to be concerned about that. Now that regular crop insurance products like revenue protection, yield protection, those are the deadlines for those products.
Okay, but there's some new insurance out there that producers need to know about.
The 2014 Farm Bill authorized a new supplemental crop insurance program called SCO, or Supplemental Coverage Option. That product is available for winter wheat producers for the 2015 crop year, and producers need to enroll by September 30th if they want it for the 2015 crop year.
Okay, now there's some language in there about the commodity growers as well?
Yes, so there's some new interactions in the Farm Bill between this new supplemental coverage option, crop insurance, and the commodity programs that producers would enroll in at the Farm Service Agency office. So there's a program called Ag Risk Coverage, which is ARC, and a program called Price Loss Coverage, which is PLC. Producers who want to enroll in ARC will not have the option to enroll in SCO. Producers who want to enroll in PLC will have the option to enroll in SCO. But here's part of the problem. Producers won't actually be able to enroll in ARC or PLC until later on this year or early next year, but they have to make the SCO decision first by September 30th. So what the option is they can withdraw from SCO by December 15th if they decide later on that they want to enroll in the Ag Risk Coverage or ARC program.
Okay, is there an advantage to one or the other?
There are advantages, disadvantages to both, and again, it kind of varies by producer, by region, by crop mix, but just a general overview, the price loss coverage provides protection if the price drops below the reference price. And just as an example, for wheat, the reference price is $5.50. So producers are going to enroll in this program once and be in it for the life of the Farm Bill. If they anticipate that prices are going to drop pretty low, PLC may be the option they want to choose. The other program, ARC, which is Ag Risk Protection, provides revenue protection, so yield and price. So if yield or revenue falls, then a payment would come from that program. However, that program is limited to 10% of the benchmark revenue in a county. And just as an example, for wheat, in most Oklahoma counties, that benchmark revenue is around $180 to $200. So 10% of that is about $18 to $20, and that would be the maximum payment from an ARC payment. The other advantage of PLC is you have the option to get this SCO crop insurance coverage, and that can also act as a revenue protection program as well, so you can get PLC and SCO. Part of the problem though is that SCO is not available for the 2014 crop year. It technically starts with 2015. ARC and PLC are available for the 2014 crop year.
Now, Jody, you're going to be on the road quite a bit over the next month and a half or so.
Yes, we are currently planning meetings with USDA and OSU Extension. Those will start up in mid-October and go through December. And we've got about 25 that are on the schedule across Oklahoma, so many producers in most areas should be able to find one that's pretty close to their area, and they'll have a lot of good information, so I encourage that they attend those meetings.
Okay, thank you much, Jody Campeacci. And for more information, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Hurricanes from the east, hurricanes from the west, just goes to prove we live in the center of all things possible, definitely all possible types of weather. Folks will be closely watching radar and Mesonet rain maps this weekend to see where the highest rainfall amounts come down. One of the forecast tools farmers and ranchers can turn to for rainfall amounts are the quantitative precipitation forecasts from the National Weather Service. On Tuesday, a rainfall forecast map for the next 7 days showed high rainfall amounts in Mexico, Arizona, and New Mexico. Most of Oklahoma was blue, indicating a 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches of rain. Wednesday's 7-day map moved forward 1 day and showed much higher rainfall amounts over Oklahoma. In southwest Oklahoma, over 3 inches of rain. Purple areas across the state were forecasted to be 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches. Mesonet fractional water index maps are point measurements at different depths. On Wednesday before the rain, the 4-inch fractional water index map didn't look all that bad. A lot of green showing good moisture covered much of the map. What was a cause for concern was deeper soil moisture across the state. Down at 24 inches, a lot of areas were colored brown, indicating dry soil conditions on Wednesday. It will take a few days after the latest rain to see how much rain fell and how much of it moves into deeper soil depths. On Wednesday, the 3-day average soil temperature was in the mid-70s for much of the state. The exception was the western panhandle, with average soil temperatures in the upper 60s. Last Saturday was the beginning of a warming trend in soil temperature. A graph of 4-inch bare soil temperature from September 11th through the 17th for Kingfisher shows the daily cycle of daytime warming and nighttime cooling. The graph was lowest early Saturday morning. After that, each day the soil temperatures were higher than the day before. Mild soil temperatures are a plus for getting wheat and canola crops up and growing. One of the measures of crop maturity are degree-day heat units. Cotton farmers pay close attention to heat units to monitor crop development over the growing season. A table with degree-day heat units for mangum in the south and Medford in the north has some surprises. This table shows the heat units for cotton from planting on May 15th through Tuesday, September 16th. The heat units are higher for mangum than Medford. That's no surprise. What is surprising is that last year, mangum had more heat units by September 16th than this year. But up in Medford, it's the reverse. Medford had more heat units this year than last year. It really pays to put numbers to our weather. Those numbers make for some interesting stories. Thanks for being a part of this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Recently, the term waters of the U.S. has become a hot button issue for most in ag. Here to talk about that issue and help us get a handle on it is our resident ag law specialist, Shannon Farrell. Shannon, let's talk about this because it really comes down to EPA control of waterways, and that is something we've been dealing with for quite some time.
Right. We've basically had the version of the Clean Water Act that's on the books now since the early 1970s. And the Clean Water Act makes it a violation of the act to discharge a pollutant to a water of the United States. Now the problem has been for years, ever since the act was enacted, there was no definition of what waters of the United States meant under the act. So basically Congress left it to agencies like EPA and the Corps of Engineers to come up with a regulatory definition. And we've gone through several versions of that definition over time, and this is the most recent version that we're contending with right now.
Let's talk about that a little bit because there really is still some confusion as to what this version is.
Well, we've had, like we said, several different ways that the agencies have tried to define waters of the United States, and most of the time a Supreme Court decision has been what's made the agency change its interpretation because they felt that the agency's interpretation didn't match Congress's intent. And the most recent version of that controversy was in a case called Rapanos back in 2006. And the problem was that the Supreme Court accepted that case thinking that they would announce one rule that would kind of clear up everything, when in fact, no opinion in that case got a majority of the Supreme Court justices. So all the agencies were actually thrown back into a state of even greater confusion about what they could and couldn't do under the rule. And that's what's led the Corps and EPA now to propose a definition that fits to the best of their understanding what the current state of the case law is about the definition of waters of the United States.
All right, so with those definitions, what they proposed, the broad strokes, what is that really going to mean if this becomes the rule for agriculturalists here in the state?
Well, one of the important policy statements that EPA and the Corps have made is that they don't believe that this rule changes or expands the jurisdiction of the agencies as it stands right now. They believe that what they've done is basically write down what the Supreme Court precedents would say waters of the United States means. But some people don't like what the Supreme Court precedents would say, and some people think that the rule, as it's worded, kind of expands that jurisdiction a bit too much. So, what does the rule as proposed say? Well, first off, what it does is it actually deletes a lot of examples of what was considered a water of the United States and kind of clears some of those things up. Another thing that's really important, and I think that's probably good for people that have concerns in the agriculture industry, is that it actually defines some waters that are not waters of the United States. And a important example of that are things like stock ponds or stock tanks, things that have been formed by damming surface runoff before it reaches a stream bed. All of that is explicitly excluded from the current definition.
Now, there are some terms, though, that are causing some real concern for industry groups.
And I think that the real cause of concern that's really gotten most of the industry groups excited and a little bit fired up about the rule is where the EPA and Corps are trying to actually write down the test as they saw it from the most recent Supreme case, the Rapanos case. And in that case, there were two terms used in one of the opinions, not the plurality opinion, mind you, but one of the opinions from Justice Kennedy. They used the terms significant nexus and adjacent waterways. And people are going, what does that mean? What Justice Kennedy was trying to say in his opinion is that even if something wasn't a waterway per se, if it had a significant nexus, which just means a meaningful connection with something that was a water of the United States, that should be under EPA's jurisdiction. And that's why we're filming here today, because we're kind of standing in a ditch, right?
Right.
And this ditch, when it rains, would flow downstream here towards Stillwater Creek, and Stillwater Creek would clearly be a water of the United States under the rule.
Right. Now that brings up, of course, the next issue, which is recently some maps came to life, which have really got people excited. Let's talk about those and what you've learned about them.
And there's been a ton of controversy about the maps being released, and lots of people, when they first see the maps, say, oh no, EPA intends to assert jurisdiction over all the waterways on this map. And if you look at a map of the United States that shows all those waterways, it can be kind of alarming. But what EPA has said is, look, we developed these maps as part of a different data set that really isn't us trying to show these are all the waterways that we could assert jurisdiction over. That wasn't our intent. But the maps were developed during the development of the Rapanos case, and so that kind of looks a little bad to an outside perspective. Still, the maps kind of do illustrate that if you really wanted to push the language to the furthest extent, then you could make an argument that all those waterways would be jurisdictional. And I think that's really the source of the controversy with the industry. It's that EPA may not intend for the language to be expansive, but if someone wanted to push the language as far as the meaning would let it go, then it really could be.
Okay. Now, to that end, I guess the latest wrinkle is we've had action in the House of Representatives. Take us through what's happened there and what we might expect to come from that.
Very recently, just last week, the House passed a resolution that would basically bar EPA from finalizing the rule or enforcing it if they finalized it. And the House legislation, it's a resolution, also said that if the rule is to go forward, that EPA has to consult with state and local agencies and with industry groups to try to get a little bit more understanding of the expanse of the rule. Now, we all know that just because the House passed that, doesn't necessarily mean that the rule's dead. There would have to be action from the Senate, and so far we haven't heard anything from the Senate on that point. But the one thing that the House can do if they decide to act without the Senate is that the House does control appropriations. And so if EPA did enact the rule and the House didn't like it, the House could basically zero out their budget for enforcing the rule.
Now, if an individual wants to get involved in this, if they want to make their voice heard, give us some ideas of what they can do and how best to go about that.
And there are two things that you can do real easily if you want to provide some input on the rule. Number one is you can go to regulations.gov, which is the federal government's regulations portal, and you can actually comment directly to EPA on the rule. And lots of people have done that. As of last week, over 200,000 comments had already been received about the rule. So you can go on there. It's got an online web form. You can submit your comments directly through the form, or you can upload a letter. And the other thing that you can do is you can talk to your industry groups, things like Oklahoma Farm Bureau, America's Farmers and Ranchers, or any of your commodity groups. They've all been weighing in pretty heavily with EPA, and you can talk to your industry or your commodity group rep and kind of let your feelings be known that way as well.
All right, plenty of good information to think about. Shannon Farrell, our ag law specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
This is the time of the year when those calves that are going to be entered into one of the value-added calf sales are being weaned, because most of those sales will require that the calves be weaned at least 45 days prior to sale date. Producers may ask, why do they have to be weaned that long before they're actually marketed? Well, there's research up in Iowa over a 9-year period of time, over 2,000 head of calves, where they looked at what happened to calves that had been weaned a short period of time, less than 30 days, and compared that with calves that had been weaned that longer period of time, something in excess of 1 month. What they found was huge differences in the health of those calves as they moved through the marketing chain and on to the feedlot. Calves that had been weaned that shorter period of time, 28% of them had to be treated for bovine respiratory disease once they got to the feedlot. Compare that with only 13% of the calves needed to be treated if they had been weaned longer than a month. Perhaps just as important was the fact that of those calves that were weaned that shorter period of time, 6% of them had to be treated 3 times or more for respiratory disease in the feedlot, compared to only 1% of those calves that had been weaned that longer period of time needed to be treated those 3 times. So when you understand the data involved with the impact of these calves being weaned that longer period of time, how much healthier they are, it makes good sense to go ahead and follow those recommendations, have those calves weaned 45 days prior to marketing. Now, during that 45 days, I think it's really important that we take good care of those calves, have a feeding program put together to where they gain at least 2 pounds per head per day during that 45-day period. That'll make the preconditioning program even more profitable. I think once you understand the whole picture of the impact of health on these calves that have been weaned at longer period of time, we understand why there's that requirement of 45 days. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, you've been tracking these low wheat prices for a while now, and last week talking about this $4.50 price point. What do you expect between now and May of 2015 especially?
I think between now and next May that the Kansas City Board of Trade nearby contract prices could get down around $4.25. Now I'm basing this on the 2008-9 marketing year and 2009-10 marketing year price trends and current corn price trends. If you look back at 08 and 09, the stocks to use ratio was somewhere around 28-29%. In 9-10, it increased up to over 40%. Right now, our stocks to use ratio is around that 27-28%. And next year, if we get this wheat planted good, we've got moisture, it looks like we're having a big crop, then we can follow the same price patterns, or near the same patterns as we followed back in 08, 09, and 9 and 10.
And then talking about next year, what about next year's harvest price?
Well, it depends on how much wheat we produce. If we have a big crop and with moisture and we're due a big crop, again, it could go from like 8-9 to 9-10 with significantly lower prices. I've been predicting a cash price of $5.50. That gives you a futures of about $6. Right now, I think I'm going to lower that futures price down to around $5.50. It could be as low as down at $4.75, or with a short crop as high as, say, $6.25.
Let's talk about the 15-16 marketing year price. How low can that get then?
Now, if we have a big U.S. crop and a big world crop, that's where we can see that $4.50. Now, that's a $4.50 on the KC futures contracts. You can take about 50 cents off of that to get to cash prices. So what am I looking at? Say a low price of 5 1/4 between now and May, low price of maybe 4.75 at harvest, low price at maybe 4.50 on the board between now and June of 2016.
And then finally, how could all of this impact farm bill programs?
Well, if we have the low prices, then that PLC program is going to look better than the ARC. It's going to be a decision. They've got out into December to make that, but low prices are going to support the PLC.
Okay, Kim Anderson, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about pump rating and how you can understand feet of head.
All right, so typically when you're trying to do a pump selection, it gives it in feet of head, and the reason they do that is they don't know what you're going to be using this pump for, so you use this feet of head, and we're going to kind of explain and try to simplify that a little bit.
Basically, when we talk about feet of head, it's really how far are you going to lift the water?
Right. So let's say that this pump located here, if it's pulling water from the floor to that pump and then up that pipe, it's from the floor to the top of that pipe is your feet of head.
That's how many feet are you moving it, and that's what it is.
But also, if we had our water level here and we had that pipe up, that's still our total feet of head, is those two pipes.
So that it hasn't changed at all. It's a matter of how far are you going to lift the water.
And then if you had your reservoir up here, that'd be that differential from your water level of your reservoir.
It's basically just boils down to it's a conversion into pressure. A lot of times when we look at pumps, we talk about PSI as our pounds per square inch for our pressure, but when we're actually elevating and lifting water, then we call it feet of head.
Yeah, and it's gallon per minute per feet of head is what typically the tables will show you.
So that's a little bit on pumps here on Shop Stop. We'll see you next week.
Now to the USDA-funded research project known as Grazing Cap. SUNUP's Austin Moore tells us about a new tool scientists are using to measure water like never before.
Behind me we have a Mesonet station, and this is one of many stations across Oklahoma. And here we have soil moisture monitoring, but just at a single point. So there are 3 or 4 sensors installed here, each one at a specific depth, and we get a measurement of soil moisture at that particular point. But we know from lots of research that soil moisture varies tremendously from one place to the next.
Because of that, Auctioner and his USDA counterparts are evaluating a new instrument called COSMOS.
COSMOS stands for Cosmic Ray Soil Moisture Observing System. It's a relatively new technology that uses cosmic rays to monitor soil moisture. The COSMOS system is unique because it has a footprint that just about matches a quarter section of land.
So here's how it works. Harmless radiation from space enters our atmosphere all the time. These particles collide with atoms here on Earth. Those collisions will sometimes send a neutron hurtling off from the particle which was struck. COSMOS is measuring these so-called fast neutrons.
So the hydrogen atom has the same mass as the fast neutron. They both weigh 1 atomic mass unit. So when they collide, that takes a lot of the energy away from the fast neutron. And so the more hydrogen atoms we have out here in the near surface environment, the more collisions there'll be with those fast neutrons, and the more those fast neutrons will be slowed down. And so that cloud, if you imagine that cloud of fast neutrons, it will get less and less dense if we have more and more hydrogen out here in the environment.
Because so much of the hydrogen around us is tied up in water molecules, measuring the neutron cloud reveals how much water is in the environment. One of the advantages of the system is that this instrument doesn't have to be buried below ground, so COSMOS can be mobile. In fact, This Cosmos rover was recently obtained with a grant from the National Science Foundation's EPSCoR program.
The Cosmos rover is a large Cosmos instrument that we put in the back of a vehicle, and we can drive this thing up and down the county roads, and we're mapping soil moisture as we go. So then we can see not only what's happening under the grassland, but also what's happening in the croplands.
This is a powerful new tool, and one we are still working to fully understand. We know that Cosmos measures more than just soil moisture. It is affected by humidity, water inside plants and animals, and even hydrogen trapped in the soil organic matter. As part of the grazing cap study at Fort Reno, these scientists are trying to learn just what these readings are telling us and how best to utilize the data.
What we're interested in is how that output may vary as the vegetation grows throughout the year, because that biomass, the water content in that vegetation is going to affect those counts, and we need to account for that. So basically what we want to do is to begin to really understand how that footprint may change itself in space and in time.
The grazing cap study will continue through 2018, allowing these scientists time to explore just how effective this tool can be. If you'd like to know more about this study, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and click on Show Links.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.